Just imagine, every morning you splash in the water with rose petals in the golden bath. Then, put on luxurious clothes, your subjects issue decrees based on your dreams. You are called the most beautiful woman and they hang on your every word. Your every touch is considered the greatest blessing for your subjects. And yes, you are the incarnate goddess. What could be better? But is it true that you have to marry your own brother, quite possibly many years younger than you? And the delicacy for you will be milk. Why did the female pharaohs shave their heads and wear a false beard? Is it true that beautiful Nefertiti was cheated on by her husband and was unlucky with her mother-in-law? Were the divine ladies of Egypt really happy? So, let's leave one day of ancient Egypt's female pharaoh. Let's just say, if you are a woman, the best time you could choose is ancient Egypt. Maid Hatshepsut, a female pharaoh. Yes, you heard right, she was not a queen, a pharaoh's wife, but a pharaoh. She ruled ancient Egypt by herself. By the way, ancient Egyptians themselves didn't call their country Egypt, but Takemet or Tameri. Her awakening began with a hymn in honor of the rising sun, because she was not just a ruler, the pharaoh was a representative of the gods on earth. The ceremony of the pharaoh's morning toilet was considered special. In addition to family members and servants, there were also particularly close courtiers and scribes. After taking a bath with the whisper of prayers to ward off evil spirits, her divine skin was rubbed with aroma oils. Then it was time for a wig and makeup. It's amazing, but we have inherited today's ideal of beauty from ancient Egypt. Modern English archaeologist Leonard Cottrell wrote, "If Nefertiti puts on a Dior dress and enters a fashionable restaurant, she will be met with admiring glances of those present. Even her cosmetics won't cause gossip." Tall and thin ladies were considered beautiful in ancient Egypt. Eyes with an almond-shaped slit, straight noses and full lips, and even fair skin. At the same time, of course, there were some oddities. The entire population of Egypt, even women, shaved their heads and wore wigs, made of hair, animal fur, and even robes, depending on their financial situation. Women also wore tiaras on their wigs, and queens wore the most intricate crowns. Surely, wear all this stuff in such a climate was not the easiest thing to do. And don't forget a lot of makeup with arrows. Both women and men wore eyeliner, which protected them from the scorching sun. Men as well as women used lipsticks and blushed their cheeks. But the Egyptians clearly preferred minimalism in clothing. How do you find this dress? By the way, subscribe to our channel right now not to miss the next video, from which you'll learn what was the life of a private detective in Victorian England of the 19th century. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. Our protagonist Hatshepsut was not the first female ruler of ancient Egypt, but usually they were all queens, wives of the pharaoh, who ruled as regents for their minor children. But Hatshepsut was one of those who called themselves pharaoh, that is, a divine sovereign ruler. By the way, this is how our protagonist would look today in the opinion of the artist Becca Saladin, who makes celebrities of the past to try on modern looks. After the death of Hatshepsut's father, Pharaoh Thutmose I, she had to marry her half-brother, Thutmose II. The thing is that in Egypt there was a complex order of succession to the throne. The throne was inherited in the female line. The sons of the pharaohs had to marry their sisters and sometimes their daughters to rule. Well, the purity of the demigod dynasty's blood was preserved in this way too. Hatshepsut was the pharaoh's legitimate daughter from his official wife, although her brother was not considered legitimate, but he was the pharaoh's offspring in the male line. By the way, such incest affected the rulers themselves greatly. Here is how the famous Tutankhamun looked like. His appearance was restored by scientists from a mummy using a tomograph. He dragged his left leg, the foot was twisted, he had a cleft lip and a whole bunch of genetic diseases in addition. But let's go back to Hatshepsut. Her marriage to Thutmose II was not successful. The couple treated each other extremely coldly and gave birth only to girls. According to his mummy, scientists found that he was not handsome at all. Ladylike features, soft muscles, loose skin with spots and scars, outstanding upper front teeth. However, Thutmose II ruled only about 4 years, as scientists believe today. And after his death, the pharaoh was his infant son from a woman of low birth, who, attention, was married to Hatshepsut's daughter, his paternal sister. Our protagonist was appointed regent firstly, but then she changed the rules and crowned herself as the Pharaoh of Egypt. That's how she became a female pharaoh. But how did she do it? Scientists are still arguing. However, even before her marriage, she was the divine consort of Ammon, the highest priestess of a mysterious cult. She enjoyed the unconditional support of the priests. Unfortunately, today we do not know what rites the divine consort of Ammon conducted. Some scenes in Egyptian temples depict the consort of Ammon worshipping deities, purifying herself in a sacred lake and walking with the king to the sanctuary. Hatshepsut was proclaimed by the priests the daughter of Ammon-Ra, who came down from heaven to the earth a queen to take the form of a pharaoh and conceive his daughter Hatshepsut. Nobody knows how it really happened, but Hatshepsut was really one of the best pharaohs. Magic and mysticism were everywhere in Egypt. By the way, here is our protagonist. Just after waking up, the pharaoh went to a special chapel where a wonderful statue of Osiris lay, whose arms, legs and head fell off every night, as if they had been cut off by evil Set. After the pharaoh's morning prayer, the statue became unbroken. Nobody knows how it worked, but it was believed that if it didn't happen, the world would face huge disasters. Meanwhile, our pharaoh Hatshepsut went to a huge dining room, accompanied by priests singing prayers. There was already a special table for her and 19 others, in front of the statues of the previous dynasties of the rulers of Egypt. If you like buns, then you are going to enjoy the cuisine of ancient Egypt. There were 15 different words denoting the varieties of bakery products. The second main element of the Egyptian diet was beer. They didn't drink it, but ate it. Their beer turned out to be thick and low alcohol. In addition to beer, the Egyptians loved wine. The sweeter, the better. But the real delicacy which our protagonist probably enjoyed was the drink available to only certain elite people. And it was fresh milk. In the Egyptian heat, they had to try very hard not to let milk go bad. Of course, there was a lot of meat, including roasted grains, which were considered a delicacy too. But unlike the simple Egyptians, our protagonist didn't eat fish. It was considered unclean food. It seems to be quite a happy life. Wouldn't you exchange your tiny apartment in a block house for a brilliant life of the Queen of Egypt? But let's try to figure out whether the divine rulers were happy with the example of the incomparable Nefertiti, who was called in the legends the most beautiful woman ever born in Egypt. It is generally believed that her husband doted on her. She supported him in all his revolutionary endeavors, and they went down in history as an example of an ideal family on the throne. And we'll see how it really was. For 15 years she lived with Akhenaten. Nefertiti gave birth to 6 daughters, that is, she was constantly pregnant. Unlikely she was able to maintain her brilliant appearance. By the way, scientists from the University of Bristol scanned the alleged mummy of Nefertiti, on which basis anthropologists recreated her portrait. And the truth is not exactly what we're used to see. At the same time, every birth of Nefertiti didn't bring a son, expected by her husband and others. The legendary beauty was also unlucky with her mother-in-law. Akhenaten's mother, Queen Taya, was a full-fledged co-ruler of her husband. She arranged the pharaoh's marriages to foreign princesses, adding them to the royal harem, and increased the number of allied countries. After becoming the queen mother, Taya had no intention to lose her authority and power. Getting along with such a mother-in-law was difficult. And what about the pharaoh? Was he the husband every woman dreams of? To put it mildly, the appearance of the legendary Akhenaten was peculiar, apparently due to some genetic disease. He had a long, unattractive face, long arms and legs, and a wild pelvis. But most important thing was his disgusting character, hot-tempered, capricious, and vindictive. In his self-deification, the pharaoh surpassed his predecessors and emanated from others such servility and worship as no one before him. He was hardly a darling in his family life. And finally, one of the most beautiful women of all time had rival, a very lucky rival. Without getting a long-awaited son, the pharaoh lost his interest in Nefertiti and brought another one closer to him. It was Kaya. He even raised her to the rank of semi-pharaoh. Unbearable resentment burned the soul of Queen Nefertiti, but there was nothing to be done. She had to accept it. And then nothing could make her happy, including the golden bathrooms. She never forgave him, and her daughter avenged the mother, but that's another story. From the dining room, Pharaoh Hatshepsut went to the reception hall. Everyone fell down in adoration. Although, unlike today's meetings with the ministers, the reports were interrupted by religious music and dancing, and the dancers covered the throne with wreaths and bouquets. Another interesting detail: decisions were made not only thanks to the reports and advice of officials, but based on the pharaoh's dreams. Yes, you heard right. The guide of the god's will to the human world went to a special room, slept a little or meditated, and then, after a libation of wine with the gods, she told the priests her dreams. They interpreted them and drew up decrees for cases which were waiting for the pharaoh's decision. It should be noted that, judging by the results of the reign of Hatshepsut, the method was effective. In the afternoon, our pharaoh began another important ritual, making her subjects happy. She went up to the terrace and sent her blessing to the 4 directions. Loud trumpets announced this moment to all the Egyptians, who had to fall on their knees and be blessed. At such a moment, neither man nor animal could be hit, and if a criminal condemned to death could prove that the sentence was read to him while the pharaoh was out on the terrace, the punishment was commuted. Because before the Lord of earth and heaven comes power, and behind him comes mercy. Well, if someone was incredibly lucky and the pharaoh touched them with his divine hand, the person got privileges. After making the people happy, Hatshepsut went to rest in the shade of sycamore tree. By the way, you will be surprised, but Hatshepsut, who also had the title the most beautiful of women, wore a beard. The truth is the pharaoh in Egypt was the incarnation of the god Horus and could only be a man. Therefore, after becoming pharaoh, Hatshepsut had to wear men's clothes and even an artificial beard at official ceremonies. Yes, and they began to depict her with a beard. However, on some statues she is still in tight women's clothing. Apparently it was not pleasant to the queen. In the inscriptions on temples' walls she also continued to call herself the most beautiful of women and refused one of the royal titles, Mighty Bull. And yes, she was not the only female pharaoh in the 3,000-year history of civilization of ancient Egypt. We see the false beard on the images of one of her predecessors too. Scientists count up to 13 female pharaohs, although they are still arguing about how much power these pharaohs had. This number, women on the throne, is explained by a very high status of women in ancient Egypt, even in comparison with modern times. Just imagine, already 30 centuries ago, long time before the feminists, women could choose husbands, divorce and get married again. And ownership of land was not passed from fathers to sons, but in the female line, from mothers to daughters. Ancient Egyptian laws granted women equal rights with men. They were educated on an equal basis with men. Egyptian priestesses used astronomy to design temples. Ordinary Egyptian women managed property, and there were many women among the doctors in ancient Egypt. The fact is, at least 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians already worshipped the three great mothers of the world in the form of Maud, Hathor, and Isis. In general, the concept of balance and harmony, Maud, was extremely important for ancient Egypt. In the beginning of time, Osiris and Isis ruled the world in justice. And when Isis gave gifts to people, she also gave them equality between men and women. Lady Pharaoh went to another dining room for dinner. There she shared food with the gods, whose statues stood along the walls. The rest of the gods' meal had to be eaten by the priests and high courtiers, as scientists found out they had health problems due to overeating. Then she went to the bathroom again, and after taking a bath, entered the chapel of Osiris to undress and lay the wonderful god and seal the doors of the chapel. Then, accompanied by a procession of priests, Hatshepsut went to her bedchamber. Our protagonist, the female pharaoh Hatshepsut, didn't usurp power, didn't expel or kill Thutmose III, who was her co-ruler all this time. Her reign was a time of peace and prosperity of Egypt. She began the grandest construction site of the century, including the most holy temple, Djeser Djeseru. Instead of sending her subjects to war, Hatshepsut organized expeditions for them. A trading expedition to the legendary country of Punt brought her the national fame. Nobody from Egypt had visited these territories for 500 years. They returned from there with gold and ivory. However, scientists have proved that the queen led military campaigns and conquered the Sinai Peninsula, southern Syria and Palestine. She even built a fleet which made expeditions to different countries. She died in her 50s of diseases. This is the conclusion that scientists came to after analyzing the mummy identified as Hatshepsut. Her stepson, Thutmose III, was as an ambitious builder like his stepmother, is a great warrior in addition. But at the end of his reign, he destroyed almost all evidence of Hatshepsut's reign, including her images on the temples and monuments she built. This was considered a curse. Why did he do it? Perhaps to erase the memory of a powerful female ruler. For many centuries, the extraordinary personality of Hatshepsut was forgotten, which was the most terrible thing to an Egyptian. But fortunately, he couldn't destroy everything. And today, centuries later, she is one of the most famous rulers of ancient Egypt, including Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, Cleopatra, and by the way, her stepson, Thutmose III. Do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. Oh, and click on the bell so you get notified when the new episode comes out.